Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blues Talk, where again, John, Dave, and myself are going to look back over Ireland's fantastic victory in France to clinch our championship and look forward to Leinster's match at the weekend. So, boys, European champions.
Yep.
Sounds good to me.
It was brilliant. That team likes to torture us, though. Those last couple of minutes were just were sheer hell. But, you know, you can see the progress there. We got lucky this time. We didn't get lucky against the All Blacks. But, you know, luck is a way of paying itself forward. I mean, we deserved our luck. You could argue that if Sexton hadn't missed the kicks, excuse me, it would have been irrelevant either way. There's some discussion about Swarzewski's try. Now, personally, I think it was a valid try, but not everyone does. But just the way we played, I thought there was a simplicity and a sensibleness and a clarity about the way Ireland played and the way the players approached it, that France, despite playing their best game of the tournament and despite obviously being up for it, they just didn't have that singularity of purpose, that clarity of ideal that Ireland did.
Yeah. Well, I think Radiohead wrote a song about the last 10 minutes of that match, which was, you do it to yourself, you do. And that's what really hurts. They could have been a few tries ahead, you know. They could have made it a little easier on themselves, but they didn't. For whatever reason, they stopped scoring at a particular point in the game, and gave us all, you know, massive. My fingernails were down to about here, down to the stump. So I think maybe they were just having a bit of a laugh. They just wanted to torture us and themselves. But it was a very exciting game. It was real proper test match. Both sides were well up for it, and it was brutally hard game. There were, you know, we were just saying earlier, there was blood all over most players. Nearly all of the forwards for a start were just pumping blood at various times in the game. The French picked a massive pack, and they went to work. You know, they really did, and they tore. I'm sure there was a lot of dirty stuff going on in the bottom of rucks, and you know, that it wasn't just all good, clean fun. Why the reason they were all pumping blood at various times in the game, and you got a loose head prop out there at 13, who's, you know, well able to, you know, bash it through, and he did. He bashed through us. If he could only offload as well as he could bash through people, we probably would have lost the game. But it was great to see such a good game. It was brilliant to get the win. Brilliant to sign off with Trico's career in green with a championship. They're so, you know, 29 years. We only got one in between. They're very elusive. Hopefully, it's the first of many more.
It was kind of an apt end at the championship that, you know, possibly the best game of the championship was the finale and the one that the championship hinged on.
Good for the championship itself.
Good for the championship itself. It's also good that the number 1 and 2 teams in the championship were the best teams in the championship, in England and Ireland.
For sure.
It shows that, you know, European rugby is still able to produce it. Certainly in terms of tournaments, the Six Nations is the best tournament in world rugby.
Might not necessarily play the best rugby in it, but
might
it's
not
the best tournament.
Play the most televisually attractive rugby. But, you know, when it comes down to it, what you had was...
It's now two-tiered, isn't it? Like there's...
Pretty much, yeah.
Ireland,
there's 4 teams.
France, Wales in Division 1 and...
Well, you see, these things have a history of turning themselves about. I mean, there was a time when England and France were so convinced that they were so dominant above everyone else that they were organising TV schedules to make sure that their final fixture was always the final fixture, because that was the championship fixture, and that changed. England fell off, have come back. France have fallen off. You know, Wales were the best team in the championship maybe for the last 3 years. These things have a way of turning themselves about. I mean, Scotland seem to be down now, but who knows in 5 or 10 years' time what will happen. Italy, I think, are still, despite the fact that they didn't get any points, I still think they're on an upward curve.
Yeah.
They've expanded their game plan. They've expanded their playing base. They've younger players coming through. I mean, they'll look at this championship and say, okay, it was disappointing, but we've got 2 guys who are going to play for Italy for the next 10 years in Sarto and Campagnaro coming through, and Tomasi Allen, a third player coming through. So, I mean, there was a lot of good stuff about the championship, but the best thing about it obviously was Ireland winning it.
Yep.
And the best thing about us winning it was the way we won it. I mean, we won by scoring tries, by playing really, really good rugby.
Having the meanest defence in the championship.
Having the best defence in the
championship. Scoring
the
most points, conceding the least. You know, we ticked all the boxes, really.
Yeah, the rugby we played at times was breathtaking. I mean, we'll see we'll see Johnny Sexton's second try. It's probably one of the best tries you'll see anywhere. So, you know, it was, in the end, it's all gravy.
Yeah, it's hard to fault it. I mean, you could pick little things in it, and you know, and they will, and nobody more so than Joe Schmidt. You could pick several instances out of the game and say, should have done better. But isn't that really a great thing that we can look at it in some ways, that we can look at such a great performance that we would have been jumping around 10 years ago, absolutely knocking ourselves out, and you know, nobody would ever hear a bad word said about it. Now we can actually look at it a bit more dispassionately and go, well, you know what? There's a few bits to work on there.
Having
few work-ons.
I mean, you know what happened to Alexander the Great after there were no more worlds to conquer? He started. You
ran out of steam.
If you always have something to improve on, then you're always going to improve.
Well, like even O'Driscoll said that he was looking forward to not being involved in the video session after that match with Schmidt. So like they're still obviously got such high standards, and they didn't quite reach them at that game. You know, it wasn't perfect by any means.
Imagine if that was a Grand Slam decider. Imagine we'd have got in for a try in the England game and that was a Grand Slam decider. It would have been an awful lot more pressure on it. Would have been, you know, and we may not have won it.
To paraphrase Grace Jones, it mightn't have been perfect, but it was perfect for me.
Yeah, but Dave, you mentioned earlier, like, it was a bit of a deja vu against New Zealand. There was so many similarities in it. We had got a lead and kind of let that slip. Sexton missed a kick from pretty much a very similar situation as he missed against New Zealand, and we, you know, sort of nearly panicked in the last few minutes by Rob Kearney. I know he defended himself today, but he did kind of kick the ball away. We didn't recapture it.
I was screaming at him when he did that.
And then to add
run back to the forwards, just run into the forwards.
But to add insult to injury, when we did get the TMO decision, we had a scrum then on in our 22.
We got lashed out of it.
I made balls of that as well.
Yeah.
Well, just to go back to Rob, I'm actually prepared to believe the excuse he gave today.
I missed that.
He said that.
Or I might have believed it too.
He had the ball, he looked up, there was a bunch of French guys coming to him, and he decided that kicking the ball away was preferable to being caught and getting turned over or conceding a penalty. And the reason I'm prepared to believe it is because of the way he performed in the game against Italy, when he was rushing the guys to get the extra point, because it showed he does have his eye on the big picture, so I'm prepared to believe that that's actually true.
Oh, I totally believe that was what was in his head.
But he didn't execute it.
He didn't execute it well, no.
Well, he kicked it quite long, and he nearly got up to it as well, you know, so you could say that...
I thought he kind of skied it, but actually part of the thing was he said that the defenders were up on him so fast that he actually felt he had to get it in the air quick, and as a result he nearly got under it and skied it rather than, you know, pinging it 40-50 metres downfield.
Oh, well, it was a table puncher of a kick, because everybody in the pub went when he did it.
Well, but I could just see a big line of forwards coming back towards him, and I went, just look, run into those guys, get a bit of protection, you know, that's what you want to do. Don't kick the ball. It's only a minute and whatever. I think there was literally 2.5 minutes max left in the game, and if he had just got to the safety of a few forwards,
but we can
even if he'd ran into one of his own men and conceded a scrum, well, it probably wouldn't have been ideal. Okay, fair point.
We can focus on the last 3 minutes, and they were the bit that kind of brought the excitement to it. But up until that point, I mean, you know, Ireland were quite clinical in how they dealt with France. You know, this was a French team playing the best rugby they played all championship, with probably the best team they put in the pitch selection wise. And
a load of Frenchmen singing the Marseillaise, and you know,
they had Tallez at out half, who made a huge difference, and absolutely, because he gave them direction. I mean, Plisson, we saw him against Stade Francais in the Amlin Cup final, and if there was ever a guy more suited to playing tag, because he keeps running sideways from across the pitch as opposed to up and down the pitch.
He's famous for that, yeah.
Whereas Tallez gave them direction, both literally and figuratively, and France were really up for this game. But we kind of took him apart on a number of occasions, and we were able to.
Our set piece was.
We made him look flat-footed. The set piece was great. The scrum was, until Ross went off, was fabulous. The line-out was just absolutely flawless. Yeah. They couldn't get near it, and you know, with that kind of, we carved them open a few times. Like that Connor, we probably see it, the Connor Murray and Trimble. That was just sliced them, you know. But you know, if you could pick things out, you know, maybe Trimble not fixing the man for that. You could have put Bodoff in for a try.
I think when
we'll see that later as well.
We see that later as well. But I think that actually, you know, in terms of stuff that aren't scoring a try, that play of Dulin to stop what happened at that point was actually the play of the tournament. If you watch the position he takes, and we see it in the try.
He didn't commit at all, sure he didn't.
No, but the position he took was just outside Trimble's shoulder. So Trimble couldn't even do the dummy and step because he would have literally ran straight into Doolan. It was a perfect piece of full back play. It's one of those things, snip it out and show it to kids kind of thing. It's funny enough, like there's 4 players in that initial phase of play, and every single one of them does the right thing. Every single one of them. But anyway, so I don't think that was what it does show though is Paul O'Connell steaming in. The guys coming in, the next 3 guys really make that try.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that shortly. But like, I think it was vital that we won that game, you know, because we were beaten by the All Blacks, we were beaten by England, we were beaten by Australia. So under Schmidt, while we've looked very convincing, we've still lost against the
clinch games,
the bigger teams again, you know, or the.
It's important to get the scalp,
and it was very important, and especially for the development of that team, that it won. You know, that it wasn't just another nearly team for Ireland, or you know, a spirited loss, kind of as we were kind of been brought up with watching Ireland for 30 or so years.
I agree with you entirely, because I think that, you know, last minute or kind of turnaround results that can damage a team. I think it damaged Northampton, for example, because what happened to us,
they're nearly men in finals, aren't
what
they?
happened against us in the final, and then the following year, what Munster did to them in the last minute with the drop goal, I think that caused a 2-year, if you like, hiatus for that team. I think it damaged it, not to sound all thorny, but it caused psychic damage to that team. I think similar things have happened to Claremont in the past as well. So if we weren't to have that happen to us, to have a 2-year hangover from that match, it was very important we won it.
Yeah. But you see, in that team, there's kind of 3 generations of players. There's O'Driscoll and O'Connell, kind of the, you know, coming to, and Darcy kind of coming to, you know, in their 30s, nearly coming towards the end of their careers. Then you have the kind of the Jamie Heaslip, so sort of the 30 to 25 year olds, and then you have a whole rake of kids sort of in their early 20s and 24 that are coming into the team. But those lads, like, you know, say Jamie Heaslip and Carney and Healy, you know, like they've just been used to winning. Like they've won Heineken's, Pro 12s, Grand Slams, you know, admittedly 5 years ago. Then you have all the other guys, the 24-year-olds coming through. They were used to winning all the way through schools. Then they're just breaking into a Leinster team that is just the winningest team in Europe for the 5 years that they're professionals. So those guys are kind of mentally, well, not arrogant, they kind of mentally know what it's like to win, and they kind of have this.
Not to be said for it,
you know. Well, that's it. I mean, to a certain extent, we kind of saw it in the football as well. The following day, and what happens when a culture of victory. I mean, the Man United team that Liverpool took on wasn't all that different from the Man United team the previous season, but there's a 43-point swing between the two. One season on another, and that was because Alex Ferguson had fostered that culture of victory within the entire club and within the squad, and it dissipated. And that's what Schmidt has done. Schmidt cultured within, and indeed Cheika and, you know, McGowan when he was there. Ulster and Munster have also been very successful. Maybe not as successful as Leinster, but at the highest level in European rugby, they've been very successful. So you have a group of players, you have a country's worth of players who, you know, don't really know what it is to lose very many games a season, and they know enough to know that they don't like it. You know,
yeah, absolutely.
You've got guys like, I mean, there's guys coming through. We could talk about, say, Peter O'Mahony. Peter O'Mahony, I'd say in his professional career, has maybe only lost a handful of games in his entire professional career.
And they were all last year in the Rebel.
Yeah, but you've got guys like that who, you know, don't really know what it is to lose and know what they have to do to win. And you've got that. That's what you got, and it's coming through even with the younger players, and it's going to be broadened because you've got Ulster coming through successfully now with their young players. So you've got the broader player base who have that culture within them. So yes, we have got that culture. The thing is, how do we foster it and how do we make sure it develops? And that's the next stage. Because remember, a new coach won a championship in his first year in 2009, and then the team turned into a bag of shite. It's Joe Schmidt's job to make sure that the team doesn't turn into a bag of shite, that it continues onwards and upwards.
He'll have a fair stab at it now.
He will.
But if you look at sort of the players that shone in this championships, it's kind of quite a lot of the underrated players. You know, like Toner, I thought was fabulous. Trimble, who was, you know, Eddie O'Sullivan mentioned it last night on Against the Head. You know, he was doing match commentary with him for BBC Ulster in the autumn internationals. You know, then you have other guys like Henry, who possibly mightn't have got into the team if O'Brien was fit. Darcy was under pressure even last season. You know, people were saying, "Oh, he should go." You had fellas saying, O'Driscoll shouldn't be in the team and he's only there because of
his reputation.
These kind of guys, and
he put that one to bed, didn't he?
He did. But
no, he's there because of his reputation, and he gave ample demonstrations of why his reputation is what it is, and indeed for has it. No, I agree with you entirely. What you have, what any good coach does is he takes a squad, and so we'll say the Irish squad with everyone fit, and you've got Stephen Ferris, and you've got Tommy Bowe, and you've got Simon Zebo, and Keith Earls or whatever, but you've got the guys below them, who, whilst not being arrogant or trying to undermine the guys above them, are absolutely convinced that they're just as good as those guys. I mean, Chris Henry was absolutely superb this season. Absolutely superb. At the beginning of the tournament, people were kind of going, should he really be playing? Is he the guy we should be going for? He proved
that he is
beyond all doubt that he is.
Yeah.
And he has his Six Nations championship, and well deserved. And no one worked harder for it. No one worked harder for it than Devin Toner, than Peter O'Mahony, than all the younger, newer guys who've come in. And they've added real value. Dave Carney as well.
They must have all worked at exactly the same amount then, if no one worked harder than them.
Well, no, but that's. I mean, you can. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but if you've got a squad and you're thinking, right, there's guys missing and there's guys injured and there's guys not been selected for whatever reason, you're not quite sure why. But the guys who step up into those places do, as well as you could imagine if you like first choice guys could ever have done.
Yeah,
you're in a really healthy place.
Absolutely, and the other thing about that is, like Jason was saying about the winning culture and the younger guys who are coming, like the Leinster Academy, just to mention one, because the one we're most familiar with, it's like you get into Fort Knox easier than you get into the Leinster Academy. It's wedged. It's wedged with people, and if somebody just doesn't have the right stuff by that amount, I mean, they could have all the talent in the world. If they don't have the right application, the right mentality, they're gone. And the place is actually made difficult for them to be in.
It's
like
ruthless.
It's ruthless. They're not mollycoddled. It's the opposite. They're tested, and they're pushed to their limits to find out what their limits are. And to have that kind of an environment and I'm sure it's the same in Ulster and the same in Munster, where there's people just getting forced through this system. It's developing these guys who are almost as good as each other, like you've just said. Guys are ready to step in. Guys you never thought would be any good. Just to mention two Ulster guys, Trimble and Henry, as we did, we might have been looking back and saying, "Oh, those guys, they're not international standard. They're great players for Ulster, but they're not into." Maybe Darren Cave might end up being the same, because that's what we're saying about him now. Let's face it, maybe he'll get a chance, and there's a vacancy in that jersey.
Yeah.
The provincial stuff, it's a pity really that there's such an edge on the provincial stuff between the provinces.
It seems to be ratcheting up a bit, particularly with the selection of so many Leinster.
I think that's true, but
there's nothing wrong with it.
That's the price we have to pay for the game getting to the level it's at. I mean, yes, there is all this. There is a huge interprovincial rivalry, but it's an interprovincial rivalry because we have, in particular, 3 really good teams, all of whom are at the business end of the season looking to win the big trophy. And because we have those teams, we have the players that those teams provide to the national squad. Mm-hmm. So, yes, it's unfortunate that not everyone gets behind the Irish team, blah, blah, blah.
But it seemed that...
But it's kind of the price you pay for having a really good Irish team in the first place.
I don't think so. From bits that I've read, and I know, you can't really judge the whole Munster fan base by a few people on a website, but by reading it, it's almost like that they want the Irish team to fail in order to vindicate their argument against Joe Schmidt's selections.
I think what you have there is
Leinster people wanted
every website
wanted Ireland to lose to get rid of Kidney.
Every province has this lunatic fringe, and they're the ones who tend to use keyboards more than anyone else.
Of course,
you will find that 99% of Munster supporters wanted Ireland to win as much as you or I or anyone else.
I hope so. And I believe so.
I fundamentally and utterly believe that. There was a fuss caused about, one player. Mm-hmm. That was it.
Leamy. What about Leamy's argument?
Well,
you're going to talk about Zebo, I know,
but there was a fuss caused about one player, and I think that argument has been done to death.
Of course.
A fully fit, fully focused Simon Zebo plays for Ireland.
But
It's as simple as that. But that's the competition. That's what you were talking about. The competition
exactly.
within the squad.
That's exactly
if he's
the
not
point
at
I'm
that
making.
100% level, then that's not good enough.
That's exactly the point I'm making, because, and you've just said it as well, because like that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
We're aiming for having guys who are ready to knock lumps out of each other to get an Ireland jersey. So you can't turn around and go, well, you know, you should just like say, let's take Simon Zebo. Simon Zebo should just sit down and take it and not. No, he shouldn't. He should come back fighting and do everything he's been given as a work on and try and do his best to get in the team and do his best to prove that he's the man.
Because it's an old thing. A player proving a coach wrong is actually a player proving a coach right.
Exactly.
You know, because he's got if Tommy Bowe or Simon Zebo or Luke Fitzgerald go out and prove that Joe was wrong not to pick them for this Six Nations, we'll leave injuries aside, then they're actually proving Joe right, because they've actually lifted themselves above that level.
Yeah.
So they had a level to lift themselves above, and it all works out for all. I mean, Simon Zebo's going to be gunning for that Argentina tour. Absolutely gunning for it.
I hope so.
Tommy Bowe is. If Ferris is fit, he is. You know, because they'll have seen the guys coming back into training, you know, today with medals around their necks.
Well, like,
you know,
Stephen Ferris would have walked into the Ireland team, but
not walking
as
into it now.
as good as Peter O'Mahony has got now, he's going to have to really up his game to get back into the team.
Same as Sean.
Sean O'Brien getting in over Chris Henry.
Yeah. There's no greater fan of Sean O'Brien than me, but you know, he has to prove that he's better than Chris Henry when he comes back. It's as simple as that. And Chris Henry has, you know, a pretty good proof hanging around his neck right now.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the way it should be. And that's what he's done. And that's but you see, it's easy for guys. It's really hard to get onto the Irish team at the moment. But once you get there, it's actually very easy to fulfill your role, because Joe has made it simple for players to come in. We lost Peter O'Mahony for the match, and Ruddock was able to come in.
Yeah.
You know, and he was able to fulfill the role, because Joe's game is a simple game. It's a very simple game. All you have to do is the basics really well.
All you have to do
really
is everything.
Fast. No, but there's no real complexity to how Joe Schmidt's teams play, be it Leinster or
some of the
Ireland.
backs moves can be pretty complex.
Yeah, but they're the kind of the funny ones. But you know, the basic play is actually very, very basic.
It's executing the skills and the pressure.
It's like New Zealand.
Basic skills.
It's like
and
New Zealand never do anything fancy.
It's keep it simple, stupid, and it's the KISS approach, and like that's
the Les KISS approach.
The Les, well, that's, I was just going to come on to the two coaches. Like Schmidt's, we threw oodles of bouquets at him last week, but we also have to acknowledge the great job that Plumtree has done, and also Les KISS. You know, when you look at the way, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen an Irish scrum push a French scrum backwards as often as we did in Paris at the weekend. Or our driving maul was phenomenal. And our defence, you know, I think we conceded 49 points in the tournament. You know, and again, you have to praise KISS. Like, I know last year we did criticise him.
We gave out about KISS.
Because he kind of came in and he kind of had the attack coach as well as the defence coach.
Say,
maybe he was spread a bit too thin.
Poacher turned gamekeeper as well. They swapped remember they swapped attack and defence coaches over to
last year. I was not
impressed
with KISS. I was not impressed. I have no shame in saying it, because you know we were pretty hopeless. But this year, whether it's a new game plan or he's got whatever he wants done within his role of sphere of influence has now sunk in. It's made a huge difference.
I just think he's been rediscovered under Joe Schmidt. He's been liberated, if you like, under Joe Schmidt.
I think Plumtree, and a certain amount of credit must go to Greg Feek as well, who's been working under him, as taking the scrum sections.
That's where all the scrumming is coming from. Yeah.
But Plumtree has done a wonderful job. He really has. I mean, you look at all the stuff the forwards do in a match, and it's done so well, and with so little fuss. I mean, we took all our lineouts, and that was it. You know, we won all our scrums. There's no big deal.
We're so good at boring in the line.
We hit so many rucks, and the guys were so fit, and the rucks were so fast, and the pods were so quick to the ball, without any fuss, without making any big.
I think it's when you change the personnel around. You know, when you bring on basically half of the pack,
and it still
works. It means that the system works and that the players trust it, and they're so well drilled at doing it that everyone just fits into like a perfectly oiled machine. That there's no one kind of going, what the hell do I do in this position here, or what? You know, they're not. It's all so drilled into them that they've practiced it. You know, the more you like as the South African golfer. I can't remember his name. Gary Player said, the more you practice, the luckier you get. You know, and it's just
I know a golf thing.
Consistent repetition. Consistent repetition.
Well, you have to remember as well that, you know, you've got a situation where, and maybe it's a fluke of the success of Joe Schmidt's Leinster team within Ireland. All the Leinster players knew the system. So were willing to buy into it because they'd seen the success that it had brought them. All the Munster and Ulster players had been on the receiving end of the system and were willing to buy into it because they'd seen what it could do at first hand.
But look at how enthused guys like Paul O'Connell
and that's what I was
are.
going to say. You see guys like Paul O'Connell, you see Rog, who's obviously talking to these guys all the time.
Who's not even in contact.
Yeah.
You know?
Paul
Correctly.
O'Connell, Peter O'Mahony, Andy Trimble, all these guys, Rory Best. Total commitment to the system. But I think that, you know, that's because they're seeing, right, Joe Schmidt's going to do this, but they're also getting this from Plumtree, who's shown them how to improve themselves as players and how to win games. They're getting it from Les Kiss, from Greg Feek. You know, the success has many fathers, and in this case, it's also true. But yeah, no, it was it. If you take a holistic approach to the team and you break it down into all the sections were successful. You know, there was no real part of the game overall. Maybe, you know, the way we closed games out, we could have done a little bit better in some of the
It's a
games.
scary bit, all right, yeah.
We didn't score a point in the last half hour against either England or France.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was about to say, yeah.
So there are, but that's something to work on.
Yeah.
You know, so apart from those, I mean, you look at you break the game down, and that's what you do. You break the game down into little sections, and you analyse each section. Every section was very successful, and that's a tribute to not just the head coach, but to the team of coaches he's put together underneath him.
Yeah, well, we did win the game clearly, and we scored 3 great tries. So why don't we have a quick go at those? So this is Johnny's first one.
I can't wait. What were we talking about? Line out, that's right. It's a lovely way. It got a bit of motion straight off the back of the line out. Over the game line, straight away. Everybody, like you're just saying, Dave, everybody knows their place and what's going on.
I think it's the quick ball and it's the precision that it's done at. I mean, nobody's doing anything stupid if they feel that they aren't making enough yards. They're not trying to scrounge out a few yards and getting done for hanging on or anything. It's get the ball, get hit, get it back. You know,
it's just the patience to keep plugging away, keep doing it, and eventually
point of attack
will arise.
And that's what we said. I mean, the one thing we had to do against this French pack was move it around the pitch. I mean, we've gone from one side to the other, or are about to go to the other side now. You know, and that's hard work for a bunch of guys who are, you know, big guys who aren't in the team for their mobility. They're in the team for their power. But Chris Henry starts getting his hands on the ball and makes a big difference here. I mean, obviously he gives the final pass, but he'd been involved.
Conor Murray nearly got turned over there,
but they were very quickly.
They were in over him very quickly. Yeah.
But this is Henry's third involvement in this try.
And a great offload from him.
Yeah. Out the back door. That was like, you know,
But that took 2 or 3 defenders with him, you know, and it gave the space for Johnny.
But like, if a Fancy Dan back made that offload, or if Sonny Bill made that offload, you'd be going, yeah. You know, this is a loose forward who hasn't even been in the team a wet day.
There's always an element of the Fancy Dan about the loose forwards I've found through history. They've always fancied themselves.
Well, it's a piano shifter giving out a lovely pass like that.
That was, you know, a thing of beauty.
But still, it was the awareness of Johnny to see that, you know, that there was going to be that opportunity, that the gaps were starting to appear, and he went for it.
It was a combination of awareness and patience. The patience not to get white line fever, not to try and do too much with the ball when you knew that the ball was going to come back. The speed of the clear out, the way that the point of attack kept moving, and then obviously Johnny taking the right angle. I mean, it again, like everything else, success has many fathers, and that try is the same.
Well, the way that they were in over, we marked it when it happened. The way they were in over the ball so quickly when Conor Murray nearly lost it there. I mean, there was 5 guys in piling straight in the top of him to get that ball back.
That was one thing that I noticed when I was watching the match was, you know, there was a few times watching Steve Walsh refereeing it, like he was so frustrating. Like even in that particular situation there would definitely be, you know, other referees would have given us a penalty in that situation, but he said, you know, the ball, Murray has his hands on the ball, he's fair game. Whereas other guys would said, oh, you know, he's
taking it the scrum half over the ruck.
If he had his hands on the ball, he is fair game.
I know, no, but that's but that's where Walsh is.
Walsh infuriates me, but I know why he does it. Walsh always seems to take a beat, And I think that's probably because he was famously hot-headed in the past, before he had his problems. And you can see now he kind of, he never makes an instant decision now. He always kind of
control yourself, control the game.
He always takes a step back. I don't fancy him as a ref, to be perfectly honest. I don't think he's that great, but I mean, he did an okay job. I mean, at least we're not talking about it.
But you fancy him in other ways, though.
No, I think I
But the thing is that would we be talking about him if the result was, if they had just got that try in the last few minutes? Obviously, we would have been talking about the forward pass, but if they had won, if they had got their penalty that they pushed wide and they beat us by a point. There was certainly a few decisions in the first.
Are you suggesting we're Welsh?
No, in the opening 15 minutes.
There was certainly, I can think of one. There was one that really annoyed me throughout the entire match, and that's not bad going. Which was when Chris Henry was penalised. The French got a penalty from it. Chris Henry was penalised for being off his feet when he clearly wasn't.
But
and
I would have said the opening 2 penalties that they got their kicks from were iffy.
The iffy penalties can go either way. That's the thing about them. I think the second one wasn't iffy. I think it was a mistake. But every referee. I don't like Walsh as a referee, but I don't think he had any material effect on the outcome.
I think it was terrible. No,
I don't think he had any material. I mean, even the most. I mean, people have been talking about Swarzewski's try. As far as I can see, the ball never actually leaves Swarzewski's hands, so it can't be a knock on. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
I mean, people have this old school regulatory kind of mindset about you have to have downward pressure, you have to have control of the ball. Neither of those are required to score a try.
Anyway, why don't we look at Trimble's try?
Well, this is a try that was actually scored in the video room, not on the pitch. It was just acted out on the pitch.
Conor Murray did really well for
This is one of those Joe Smith, you do ABC and you'll score tries. And that's what happened.
Trico got the gain line moving for us. Conor Murray, that was pinpoint accuracy.
The try reminded me
committed the men as well. He did the whole
of a try that we scored against Northampton in the Heineken Cup final, where it was actually Drico that came through the ruck,
and laid off to Heaslip, was it? Yeah. Well, you see, that was a try. I mean, I'd say that exact move has been practiced the week leading up to that 3 or 4 times, because it involved France doing a number of things that they normally do. They're slow to get up from scrums. They're slow to man up on the blind side. You can see them all rushing to the open side. If you see it here, well, you can't see it, it's too far on. They all come to the open side and leave a huge hole in the blind. And Joe, if I can spot it, Joe Schmidt can spot it, And I'd say, it's like I said, it was scored in the video room.
Yeah. But it's just great analysis again by the boys,
It was beautiful, yeah.
It's exactly like the try that Leinster scored in the Amlin final.
Yeah.
And this is probably the best try we scored this season, I think. There's just everything about it is good.
That reminded me of the New Zealand where Carney did the interception.
Yeah.
If he only run the 70 yards this time.
But they were...
The real Dealey Healy makes another few yards.
Well, we were quick to see it was on. If you look at all the space in front of the boys, in front of Trimble.
Trimble does really well here.
Beautiful breakthrough there.
But look at Dulin. He's not committing himself at all until he absolutely has to, and gives Medar a chance to come back to make the tackle.
I think that he could have actually...
You'll see, if you see it when you see it from the other angle, you'll see the distance that Dulin has. We'll talk about it after we actually talk about the try, and we'll show it again, and then we'll go through it, because it's actually an interesting point in terms of defensive shape and things like that for fullbacks. This was a great try. I think you were talking about Paul O'Connell.
Everybody's highlighted it. I think they had Lenihan had a camera on him and a little thing where he was the first forward to the ball, which is very impressive for a second row. Has to be said.
He made huge yards to get there. He is.
Look, and he's straight in over the ball,
and the next 3 guys in as well. Yeah. O'Connell sets up the ruck. The next 3 guys clear it out, and then French coming in the right angle.
Seriously flat-footed though, just like in the last try. They were seriously caught napping, It was a big hole, like for an international team.
Sometimes against a team like France, you can get wide, and it can work for you because they're not really expecting it to happen. They tend to think that
Murray
nobody's going to play the way that they play.
Again, Murray with the last pass.
Oh yeah, Murray had a very good game, I thought. I mean, you could have argued before the match that Redden had done enough against Italy to keep his place, but I think Murray. And that's the thing again about the competition we were having. We spoke earlier in the tournament about the role Paul O'Connell had, how the role he was taking with under Schmidt's Ireland was different than the role he was using under previous coaches, where he was a primary ball carrier. Whereas we were saying he's been used now in second and third against players less capable of dealing with his power. But what do you always remember about when Joe Schmidt selected Leinster teams to play away in France?
He got the biggest pack he could get.
He always had a tank in the second row. It was usually Damien Brown, but he always picked a tank. And over in France, Paul O'Connell was the tank today, or on Saturday. He took the ball at first receiver. He used his power to suck in that big French pack in close, and then we could go wide because they were taken in.
It was a big French pack, though.
Yeah,
it was the biggest pack they could probably...
Like
that back row was like a South African back row, you know.
Sonnandre kind of got his selection pretty much right, didn't he? He kind of...
By default.
Yeah. Except I'm surprised that he took off their scrum half.
Yeah.
He was cramping up. I don't think he had a lot of choice in the matter. And he was playing very well.
If you had Morgan Parra there, even on the bench, instead of your other man...
The question is, if you had Morgan Parra, would, the
poison in the dressing room?
Yeah, well, that's it. Would they have even put in the effort? I mean, you got Talas, right? I think there are guys, obviously, Nyanga, Dusakar to come back. And there was a guy I was watching the under-20s. They had a back row player playing in the under-20s. It might be... I can't remember his name. Began with a C. I think it's Carreras or something like that. But he's the future of French rugby. I've seen the future of French rugby. It's this guy. He was 6'5", 6'6".
Is he an 8 or a 6?
He's a 7. Well, he's a French 6. He's an outside.
Okay.
He's
and that under-20 team won the Grand Slam.
Burning pace. Absolutely burning pace. Huge power. This guy is going to be something special. Watch this guy. If I can remember his name, but he was magnificent.
Ian Henderson's brother, is he?
Kind of. He's like a bigger and bigger Ian Henderson. That's huge. Big. He's magnificent.
Well, you just said you're going to see the future. Well, we'll just briefly talk about Dricko, who unfortunately that was his last game for Ireland, and what a great way to bookmark his career. After his heroics in 2000, end off with a win. But obviously he's going to go. But now I suppose the next question is who's going to replace him. No one can probably replace Dricko, but someone's going to have to play 13. And there's the candidates. Whether it's going to be Luke in at 13. Certainly, maybe for Leinster, he might come into 13. You got Henshaw.
The aforementioned Mr. Cave in Ulster.
Up in Ulster, yeah.
I think and Payne obviously. Will he be 15? Will he be
bet? I think.
Well, Payne, will he be 15 or will he be 13?
I'd say
you'd nearly have him at 15 because there's a big gulf there between Rob Kearney and Felix Jones. And there is. Felix Jones is a very good player, but would you have him in a test match against France and to win the, let's say Rob Kearney got a bang? You'd rather have Jared Payne there, I would have thought. Guy Easterby today, I think yesterday, there was a press conference, and he was asked the very same question, and he said, well, there's Brendan Mackin, Fergus McFadden, and Luke Fitzgerald. He said there's a bit of an issue getting players this close, foreign players this close to the World Cup. So while we're looking, we're not too hopeful. We probably have to make do, because let's face it, you got to get somebody better than Luke Fitzgerald.
The thing is, you're not really going to get this close to World Cup. You're not going to get an international.
You're not. No, the only kind of guy you'll get is somebody. I think you mentioned Robbie Froome earlier.
Yeah, somebody who's for inexplicable reasons.
But for Team Ireland, the IRFU will want 3
13,
Irish 13s playing.
But it's basically you've got
strong provincial teams.
You've got Argentina. You got the Argentinian tour, maybe the autumn internationals. And
then you're into Six Nations
then you're
again.
again.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you've got those maybe 5 games to decide.
Who you're putting your weight behind?
Who you're putting your money on. Jared Payne doesn't qualify until the autumn internationals. Mightn't be a worse thing to avoid an Argentinian tour. I mean, they're not always happy hunting grounds for Ireland. So you've got Luke, you've got Darren Cave, Henshaw, Earls, and the thing is, they're all equally in last place as far as that, because some of them have had opportunities there, but none of them have convinced.
Yeah,
none of them.
No.
The thing that we spoke off air about,
but there are enough of them.
There's certainly
there's enough potential candidates there. If you add them all up, you've named them there: Payne, Earls, Fitzgerald, McFadden, Cave. There's a list that's.
I'd see McFadden more as a 12 and a 13.
Yeah, his game suits that style more. I think.
I think you're right, but that was the dream team back 3 years ago. Was O'Malley and McFadden would take over from Darcy and O'Driscoll, and don't have O'Malley anymore. So
the one thing that with the way that the ERC or the Heineken Cup or whatever version of the European competition it's going to be called, There's going to be
Champions Cup, I believe.
Champions Cup. There we go. There's
going to be. I believe it's the European Rugby Champions Cup. It's going to be an amalgamation.
Okay.
And from what I hear, no title sponsor. It'll be the European Rugby Champions Cup, sponsored by
X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the thing is that the way the qualification is going to go, the more likely that there's going to be, Connacht aren't going to get in there.
Mm-hmm.
Henshaw has signed a 3-year deal for Connacht. Joe Schmidt has alluded to the fact that there is a significant step up from Heineken Cup rugby to international rugby, because he's seen it firsthand now. Is he going to be prepared to let Henshaw play in the equivalent of the
divisions
Amlin
below, yeah.
and Pro 12 matches?
No.
So you're going to have to see maybe a situation where Connacht is becoming a feeder club to the, and anyone that's of any note coming through is going to be hoovered up by the other three big.
It's going to be very, very difficult for Connacht unless they can start getting regular European competition. And to be perfectly honest, it's their own fault, because this year their team is good enough to be qualifying for Europe out of right. So no sympathy for them. They're going to lose their players. I mean, Marmion's going to go, Henshaw's going to go. It's as simple as that.
But you can see
brought it on themselves.
But you can see guys maybe coming through the academy in Leinster that might be blocked by somebody ahead of them, or an established international, and say, right, well, maybe it's time for me to realise my level and move to Connacht. So they're going to just be consistently.
I can't see too many people following that one.
Yeah, I can see it.
Rather go to the Championship in England and work their way up somewhere,
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of it that Connacht has the real danger of becoming the Royal Antwerp of Irish rugby, as kind of a dumping ground for ex-United players. But are Connacht going to qualify for the Heineken Cup next year?
No.
Is Joe Schmidt going to want two of his key young players coming into a World Cup playing at best Amlin and Pro 12 rugby? The answer to that is also no, I would suggest.
Mm-hmm.
Are Henshaw and Marmion going to be playing for Connacht next year? No.
We can see maybe the greatest need being in Munster in terms of a 13.
I could see Henshaw going to Munster. I could see Marmion coming to Leinster.
Who knows? Maybe even Ulster. I mean, behind Pienaar isn't a huge amount. Marshall seems to be going backwards.
Yeah, possibly.
And Heaney,
it could well happen. It could well also happen. Yeah.
Well, anyway. Speaking of Ulster, they had a nice handy win against Scarlets at the weekend, but most importantly, it was great to see Stephen Ferris.
Big Stevie Ferris,
and he played pretty well.
Yeah.
That was a legendary. His first line out.
I'm wary about saying anything about Stephen Ferris until he's played 3 or 4 games. To be perfectly honest, I mean.
Looking good so far, though.
We've seen we've seen comebacks from Stephen Ferris before, and they haven't lasted very long. No fault of his own. It's just genetics.
I heard him interviewed, and he said that he's a little more cautious now going into contact than he would have been previously, and maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe because what's always said about him, and I've heard it said about Willem Alberts as well, the South African, is that it's like they're too strong for their own body. Their muscles are too strong for their frame, or their brain is too gung ho for what they've got going on. And maybe if he just notches that back and just plays a little bit cuter, and not quite as, he can still be aggressive, but not quite as devil may care with the contact, that he might get a few years out of it.
If Ferris stays fit to the end of the season, then he has to go to on the Argentinian tour, because he's just
too good to waste.
It was interesting. I heard Joe Schmidt been interviewed today, and he basically was saying that he can see there's obviously the 3 provincial teams are at the pointy end of the season between Heineken Cups and Pro 12s. There's been a relatively big pool of players in the match day teams played in the Six Nations. He was talking about leaving quite a few of those at home and bringing a more development squad over to Argentina.
Well, he might like to talk about that, but when the bean counters say, well, if Argentina come over here with a development squad for an autumn international, we don't sell out our stadium. That's not really going to happen.
There's that, and there's also the fact that
you need his entire first 15.
Yeah, that was a special. That was an out of season tour, if you like.
Body experience.
That was a pre-World Cup thing. That wasn't part of the regular tour schedule. I mean, yes, you can do a certain amount of experimenting, and he will do. But at the end of the day, Irish rugby depends on the income from those games in the Aviva Stadium. if we send down shit teams, they send shit teams up here and we don't get full houses. Now, you can do a certain amount of it because I think he's going to use guys like Tommy O'Donnell, guys like Stephen Ferris if he's fit.
Yeah.
Depending on how Sean's comeback
No,
is.
Sean won't be there.
Sean, I don't think he's going to be back.
Sexton, I bet you won't go.
I doubt Sexton will go. It'll
definitely
be
not.
I bet you Darcy won't go.
I know.
I would be surprised if Rob Kearney went.
You might be. They might be.
Heaslip went.
They might be required.
Heaslip will be there.
There's a new IRB tournament calendar
indestructible
in place, and part of the requirement is that teams send teams of appropriate strength abroad. You can't just say I'm going to send what is essentially a Wolfhounds team.
The other factor.
Then you won't get the tests. It's as simple as that.
The other factor is this: you can't just pick. You can't do a Michael Cheika versus the Dragons and pick a load of kids and send 2 or 3 internationals with them. You've got to pick key people like Heaslip, for example, maybe even Mike Ross, God love him, just in positions of importance. You need senior players because there's no point in sending them all to fail together in Argentina.
Well, in fairness now, I know the Lions was on last summer, but we sent a team and quite an inexperienced. We did rest quite a number of players for the North American tour.
Yeah, but that's North America,
they're not a tier 1 side.
Not at all.
That's we sent a team to Georgia as well, but I mean,
well, that was a development team.
That was a development team, but it was a development competition. But there will be guys who have to be there. But that's not to
Argentina
say,
play in the Quad Nations. You know,
he doesn't necessarily have to send, say, Paul O'Connell. He can send Donica Ryan because he wants to have a look at him.
Exactly.
But that's
Devin
what
Toner.
I was kind of trying to say. They're not going to send out the 15 that started again.
Oh God, no.
Well, obviously with Trickle gone,
but he still has to send out a squad of sufficient quality to be challenging in the test matches. Because he's going to want to keep the run up because it feeds into the thing, and also because he's going to want to look at
the Madigans and the Jacksons will go.
I'm not talking, I don't see Johnny going.
But what I mean is that they're not going to pick guys who are on the fringes of the Leinster panel. They're going to bring guys that are on the fringes of the Irish team.
Oh yeah. Oh no, that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, but I'm not going to. It's not going to be a team devoid of your Heaslips and your Rosses or your.
I can see Heaslip going for sure.
I can see the spine of the team pretty much. Maybe not Paul O'Connell.
I'd say maybe someone like
not
Heaslip
Johnny
would captain it.
Yeah,
Heaslip will be the captain. Conor Murray will probably go.
Yeah.
Quite a good sprinkling of the top guys.
I mean, you could quite easily envisage a backline of, Madigan / Jackson, Darcy, whoever wins the number 13 talent competition, Bow, or it could be even Earls or Bow and Zebo on the wings and Carney at fullback. I mean, that could be the backline that takes the field against Argentina. So there's still enough of a blend of. Not youth, but certainly experimentation compared to where we were in the Six Nations, and the pack would be similar. Instead of starting Keane Healy and Mike Ross, he might start McGrath and Moore, and then bring on Keane Healy and Mike Ross.
Well, of all places to send a young, inexperienced front row, it's probably the last place on the planet, with the possible exception of South Africa.
Well, the thing is,
and even then,
they're not a young, inexperienced front row anymore. I mean, they're a Six Nation champion front row. Yeah. That's the thing.
Poor Al Marty Moore got fairly well sussed out by that team.
I think I still say that the responsibility for that lies between Marty Moore and the back five.
His back five let him down a bit, but the back five weren't on. They were wrapping around the whole scrum. It was his side that was. Your man got the better of him. He outwitted him for whatever reason. He'll learn from that. He'll come back stronger, but. At the end of the day, heading for Argentina, do you want him thumped again?
Yeah. No, I want him learning.
He's probably 4 years away from his peak,
Yeah.
And if you think of the amount of first-class matches he's played, you're probably talking 20 games.
That's why you're not going to want him to start all the games in Argentina.
I'm not saying he should start all the games. I'm not even sure. Are there games outside of the tests?
I don't think so. I think it's just 2.
So you've got 2 tests. So I would suggest that maybe you start each front row in one of them and bring the other on, and that gives you that blend.
Well, as we know, front row is an entirely different animal to the rest of the team. There's 2 front rows for every every match now, and they're interchangeable more so than a second row. One will last the game and the other one will be subbed off, whereas the entire front row comes off after 6 minutes. So it's kind of slightly different than the rest of the positions. But anyway, we're back to the Pro 12 this weekend. You got to think that quite a few of the boys will be back available.
Yeah, I would have most of them penciled in with the big 8 that played that started the test match, and obviously Sean O'Brien won't be there. Everybody else, Who have we got? Jack McGrath and Sean Cronin have registered with injuries. So outside of them, everybody else, the Ruddocks, the Madigans, all of these guys are going to be needing a game. Marty Moore himself are all going to be needing to start games. We're going to be needing them to play. We're in the happy position where we've got more than enough players in the squad without those 9, 10, 11 guys to make mincemeat of Zebre. We should be looking at a bonus point win here. Be disappointment if we get 3 tries. Because the end of the season is going to be very tight between the 3 Irish provinces as to who gets the home
Ulster's
games.
win, it pushes them up. They're 4 points behind us and 55
4 points behind us.
Munster just 1 behind.
It'd be nice to, because they're away in Edinburgh, it'd be nice to push on and get a 5-pointer and be 5 clear points ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the 5-pointer is vital.
And to stay ahead of Munster as well, who have a very easy game.
I agree with you as well in terms of selection. I think that, as many of the guys who are fit and available, obviously, as you say, Cronin and McGrath aren't. Should get the start because they need the start and we need them to get a start, and then you blend in the guys who've done so well in the period that they've been away. So you have Strauss and Moore starting, maybe with Bent or O'Connell at loose head.
I'd say Bent will get the start.
I'd say Bent.
O'Connell is going, so he'll be used sparingly where needed.
Yeah, you probably got Mike McCarthy and Leo Cullen second row. Back row. It's interesting. Jordy Murphy number 8, Leach Ruddock number 6.
Yeah.
Whoever at number 7.
Or maybe McLaughlin, who's just coming back.
Maybe McLaughlin and move Ruddock across to 6.5, as it were.
Well, you've got Ryan and Jennings to, either of them could get the 7 jersey and the other one on the bench.
We're not short of players.
Definitely not.
So we're very strong. I'd be very disappointed if we don't get at least a bonus point out of this.
We have probably somewhere between 9 and 11.
Bonus point, that is.
Yeah. 9 and 11 games left in the season, depending on how the Heineken Cup quarter final goes. We should do enough to get a home home semi final in the Rabo, barring a match. Well,
also only they won their game in hand, so they're I said only 4 behind.
It's
us.
tight.
It is tight, and the match up in Ravenhill will be a tricky one. Obviously, the match the following week in the Aviva against Munster, another tricky one. Those lads have been ratcheted up with
there's a crap load of Interpros coming, and with the Heineken Cup going, with 3 provinces in the Heineken Cup, we could end up with, if we in that great scheme of things, if we could manage to get all 3 into a semi-final, well, at least 2 of them would obviously have to play each other, and then any bets are off after that.
What would be best for us in terms of this weekend is if we were to win and the other 2 were to lose.
Yeah, of course. But Munster are not going to lose at home to Treviso.
No.
Treviso are in free fall.
I'd say they could even feel like us.
Steady on, Dave.
And there's 45,000 seats sold for the match in the Aviva, which is...
Yeah, it's great.
Obviously, Irish rugby at the moment, after the weekend, is on a pretty big...
It'll be great to see all the Munster guys with the chips on the shoulder coming back to try and take a swing at us, because we did so well in the selection for the Six Nations, and that's a good thing, and it'll set both of us up for our Heineken Cup quarter-finals.
That's my point.
Hopefully.
That's what the point I was making earlier. The rising tide lifts all boats.
Thanks a million for watching, and thanks again, lads. Cheers.